Hello and welcome into a new edition of Big Talk, college sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. I'm Dalton Shetler alongside Sam Sprunger. Sam, we're heading into week 11? How are we doing?
Well, as a fan, not well. But that is nothing that I'm not used to. Like that's nothing new. But so many storylines that can just keep pulling me along through the football season to get us to basketball.
Well, and that's kind of what's interesting to me, this football experience, because the Big Ten is down in football. I mean, it just is. Like you're at the very top, you've still got some pretty elite competition, but like the gap between that and what the rest of the Big Ten is this year is so vast that we head into week 11 and we still don't know if Michigan is elite good because we haven't seen them play anybody until this weekend.
The Big Ten has 4 ranked teams, and the lowest, the fourth highest ranked team is Iowa. Yep. So that tells you about the Big Ten this year,
because Iowa has to be ranked at 7-2, and they're going to play in a championship. Like, they have to be ranked, and they should be 8-1 if it wasn't for the invalid fair catch signal. When you think back on that too, like Iowa got robbed out of being 8-1 with 3 games to go. But
can you imagine that? They would be in the top 12. Like maybe 15 at 8-1 and averaging like 13 points a game.
The Iowa experience is just a fever dream on its way to Indianapolis. It's amazing. But so we talk about the Big Ten talent and production on the field hasn't been necessarily great as a whole. Again,
right.
Bear with me there. The top of the top is still playing like the top of the top, but the rest is just not
10
great.
Teams.
Yeah.
Goodness. I mean, yeah.
And so when I say that it's not great, like you got to keep in mind, I'm not counting that. I'm saying as if you look at it from a whole, because I got caught in the weeds with somebody in this conversation not long ago. So I want to make sure everybody understands what I'm saying. But really what's been pulling us in, much to your point, Sam, is the storylines. And let's start right there, because Michigan, this alleged sign stealing scandal has been going on for weeks and weeks now. And it's funny because you and I were talking real quick before we actually started the broadcast, and we're like, I think we have to. I know we've talked about it the last few weeks, but there's more information. I think we have to do it again.
We have to.
I kind of see this as like, imagine you're a young, energized boxer or MMA fighter, right? You're like, the story starts. And you're hearing this, and it's juicy. You're all excited. You're amped up. You start getting in the ring. Everything's going great. And by now, I feel like we're in the late rounds, and I have just been getting busted in the face. Like, it's almost not even a fun story to me
like
anymore.
Rocky with the swollen eyes.
Yeah, it's so overwhelming.
Cut me, Mick. Cut me.
It's so overwhelming. And I love, it's fascinating how there's new information everywhere it goes. Like, the 30 for 30 on this is going to be unbelievable. It will.
It's going to be. And the fact that we can like play it out and be like, okay, they're going to talk about this in the 30 for 30. Like, and there's going to be all sorts of fun nuggets that we don't know now that will come out in 3.5, 4 years before the 30 for 30 comes out.
But yeah, I mean, everything we've learned, we talk about the Connor Stallion's side business I saw maybe reported. So here's the thing too, is at this point, I'm not even caught up to speed because there's so much that's been going on in between Big Ten football, men's basketball, women's basketball. I am drowning in this Stallion story. Mm-hmm. So Sam, what did you find recently that you wanted to talk about?
I just lost my train of thought, Dalton. Thank you for that, because I was sitting there thinking, man, this is so screwed up. What flusters me is it is always brand new. Like, all of a sudden he resigns. And it's like, did he resign, or was he going to be fired?
At first it was reported that he was fired, and then they corrected it saying he resigned.
Which is semantics, I'm sure. But what I find interesting is there's going to be so much push for this season to be some sort of a punishment put forward on Michigan, because the more and more time goes by, the more and more smoke starts happening and coming up. And we all know where there's smoke, there's fire. There's got to be some sort of in-depth thing that is going to just implicate all, probably most of the coaching staff, if not all the coaching staff. I don't see a way that Jim Harbaugh walks out of this season with a job still.
Well, and that's fascinating to me too, because you have so many different degrees of this, and now we've read the reports that Big Ten coaches are upset, and rightfully so, of the allegations, and
it's
as
their way of life as well.
Correct, and as the
way of life.
As the team that you're a fan of, Purdue head coach Ryan Walters, we saw he might have been the most icy in his comments this past week on his own show, where he said, it's not allegations. You can just drop saying alleged and allegations, because we have evidence they bought tickets and were sitting in our stadium for our game. And he went on. And then, of course, the post-game handshake with Jim Harbaugh was not much of a handshake. It was a more just kind of brief shoulder-to-shoulder contact, move
Passing
along.
in the night.
Yeah, just a drive-by. Which, I mean, it goes to show just how upset the Big Ten coaches are. Again, fair game on that. So we know they're upset. What the big question to me is, what will Tony Petitti do about this? Because there maybe is a bit of a conflict of interest. You want to try holding the integrity of the game. And I find it fascinating now, because you have, and again, I haven't read all the way through this, but the University of Michigan and several state of Michigan lawmakers writing to the Big Ten Conference, cautioning them against premature action against the University of Michigan. And so now you're getting in this legal battle where state of Michigan lawmakers are getting involved because they like the University of Michigan and they like the football program.
Well, sure, they make millions for the state.
So it's fascinating to me, because I don't have the legal expertise to know exactly what the next steps are. What is the Big Ten's jurisdiction with this? You imagine they have to be responsible for being the authority on making sure there's a competitive balance and integrity of collegiate athletics. But also, I don't understand this, where there's these legal ramifications where the University of Michigan says, hey, we will sue. I really am not quite sure how this plays out. And as I said earlier, I just feel like a boxer who's entered the late rounds. I was once really excited about this story, and now I've been hit in the face. My nose is split open. I am just waiting for a result at this point.
Well, what will make coaches happy, the Big Ten coaches happy, as a punishment too? Is it as far as, look, you've got to make them ineligible for anything going, like no Big Ten title, no CFP. Now that makes Michigan mad. Well, what if we force them to suspend their coach? Is that enough to make the coach? I mean, because you know what? Suspending the head coach, I'm sorry, but he's not going to be the most involved with this sign stealing issue. Okay, like, it's not going to come from him and work its way down. He may know about it even.
And I would ask, is that a fair punishment? Because I mean, should it be going more than that? Should it be going less than that? Like, I'm having a hard time necessarily gauging exactly what the punishment should be. And of course, you have people on both sides, right? You have Michigan fans that say, oh, I think even the state of Michigan lawmakers pointed out, they said, well, in the game since the Stallions accusation, Michigan's actually beating teams by a wider margin than they were before. So you don't have actual evidence, is what they're holding up to the Big Ten. And it's like, that's a joke.
Purdue, for crying out loud.
Somebody said on Twitter in a response, or X, whatever you want to call it, this is an extreme level of gaslighting. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty fair. Like, that's pretty rough. But then you have the other side that says Jim Harbaugh needs to be abolished. Michigan needs to be, shut down, at least for the rest of the year. And I don't really know. Do you keep them out of the postseason? Because here's the other thing, Sam. it's not the players' fault. So the players who are playing could be punished for something that they really probably weren't even aware of. Like that's not a far cry to believe that the players weren't in on this. And so from one angle,
because you could put them in position to make plays without them being aware that they're being put in position to make plays.
Exactly. So in one angle, you kind of feel for that. On the other side, again, like, let's not totally diminish this. This is not okay. It's unacceptable what has happened. So I don't know. And it's much like when programs get punished and they say you're not eligible for postseason for crimes they did in years past. And student athletes on that team are like, well, what the heck, man? Like, I wasn't here. I didn't do anything. And now I can't play.
8th grade.
Like, we've had unjustified punishments. I don't even know if unjustified is the right word, but like we've always had a difficult time trying to figure out the right way to go about punishments in college football, college athletics, because it seems pretty hard and everything seems to be pretty retroactive, especially when you talk about the year to year and kind of like we're talking about. So I really don't know how you're supposed to handle this punishment. You can't let it go completely untouched. You just can't.
And that's the thing. Is this, we were talking before we went to air. This is unprecedented. We've known about things or something during the season, but it has to play out. This is so in depth and goes so past what we're used to, that this is so unprecedented that I almost don't see a way that Michigan can finish this season unpunished in any way and have people still be happy with it. I don't know, even if you were even though Stallions has resigned, and he's no longer associated with Michigan, or whatever. He was in that system. All those coaches are aware. I'm sorry, you can't convince me that he was one rogue, whatever he was, associate, and has that in depth. I can't go stand on the sidelines with them. I'm sorry. I just don't see how Michigan can go unpunished, but yet I don't have any idea what the punishment is.
And that's kind of where I'm at. And especially as we're looking here, I mean, we're just about 2 weeks away from Michigan, Ohio State playing.
Yeah.
So we're running out of time with this being a proactive thing rather than a retroactive thing after the season. The clock is ticking.
Well, retroactive comes as late as the first Saturday in December, because that's a championship game.
Yeah.
That all of a sudden, anything that happens, it has to be retroactive. And if Michigan beats Ohio State again and goes to Indy, but something happens to where Michigan can't go to the CFP, does Ohio State get put it back? I mean, does the team that Michigan beat in the Big Ten championship become champion, or does Ohio State,
Iowa,
yeah.
Let's go.
But my point being, though, they wouldn't have been there had Ohio State won. So therefore, they get punished that, Ohio State should have played in that championship. And you're not going to convince me that Iowa was going to beat Ohio State or would beat Ohio State.
Really?
Yeah. Well, it's
why you play the game, Sam. It's why you play the game.
You get my point.
Yes, I know.
We are going to be it's going to be retroactive come December 2nd. Come December 2nd, everything becomes retroactive because other teams could have been in places that Michigan was in.
Yeah. So I'm very much with you. I'm not sure exactly how you go about rightly punishing this, but there has to be some punishment. And besides even just the other accusations that exist, from the evidence that we've heard, we've seen, that's enough. Again, I'll go to the MLB. You're a big baseball fan, Sam.
Yeah.
The idea of a runner on second base trying to figure out what the catcher is trying to sign to the pitcher, that's existed forever. And you know what?
It's within the rules.
I was going to say, that's kind of gamesmanship. Yeah. It's a part of the game. We all accept that as a norm. What we don't accept is the banging of trash cans in a dugout to signal to a batter what's coming.
With little signals.
With alleged buzzers on their chest and with cameras out in the outfield fence that's zoomed in on those. So, like, that's what we're talking about here. There's always been gamesmanship of trying to figure out what every other team is doing. But that leap that the Astros did. But here's the thing, Sam, I come back to. Astros didn't get punished.
No, not a bit.
And that's not okay to me either.
No.
I'm still upset about it years later. But I just, that's kind of the example that goes in my head when I'm thinking about this entire situation. So I don't know what's going to happen here, but it's a mess. And I do believe, I will say again, I believe something needs to happen.
Yeah. And again, I will go back to, but I don't know what. Yeah. Because we don't know, we haven't seen this before. So we're not like, oh, well, back when so-and-so did. This is going to be the benchmark for what happens in this realm. Yeah. How do you punish a team in season?
And at this point, we just need to change the rules where we can allow helmet technology where coaches are just saying into quarterbacks' ears to plays. Because, I mean, the idea of having 6 different ballerina dancers on the sideline in different colors to try and dummy signals, like, I mean, here's kind of what's a byproduct of it. Like, we've got to just advance the aspect of the game.
Well, I would think that would be, I mean, granted, there's always going to be times that you're going to have issues with, that technology to where you have to go to it. Having it as backup is one thing, but yes, I agree. There needs to be some communication here so the coach just can say the play. They can, and then we eliminate the sign stealing.
Yes.
This in depth. I am
Correct.
with you completely. I will never, ever be mad at somebody for figuring out signals in game or signs in game. Never at all. Good on you.
Yep.
If you can get that advantage and figure out maybe, but you did it in 1 second. You didn't go in, record only, and then go, okay, and that was this play. Okay, we figured out their signs. Well, you know what?
That's the problem isn't that they got the information. The problem is how they got the information.
Correct.
Like, that's the big thing we're talking about here. But we spent a lot of time on Counter Stallions for a 4th straight week. And
yes, and thank you. Well, and I've even made the statement one right before we change, well, kind of change topics. But I made the statement that I wouldn't be surprised to see Jim Harbaugh as the Bears head coach by the end of the season. I say that kind of in jest, but at the same time, there's so much happening right now. I think it would be surprising to me if I saw Jim Harbaugh coaching in Indy with Michigan if they were to make it to the championship game.
Well, and I believe I saw somewhere, and again, I have just been drowning in this story and so many others, so I may have missed it, but I believe the NFL had said something along the lines they're looking into this situation too, where they're not just going to be a parachute for Jim Harbaugh, where he could just flee to the NFL, kind of like what Pete Carroll did for USC.
So in other words, he's going to carry some sort of a punishment with him over to the NFL.
Something like I believe, I don't know if the NFL got very far in it. Hopefully the report I read on this is actually accurate, but I believe I saw this somewhere that the NFL had said, to a degree, they're looking into it because they don't just want to give a freebie in this situation. So if that is true, I'm pretty curious.
When did the NFL care?
Well, I'm glad they started caring though, because that's the Pete Carroll situation chaps me still too.
Yeah, well, it always that type of thing is running away, absolutely. But why are we picking and choosing to care now? That's my question. You didn't care, you haven't cared ever, but now you're gonna start. Like, what was that? We've had enough. I mean, it's not a new commissioner, it's not anything. It's like, what was it that this
over the line?
This is our line finally, and you stepped over it.
Well, I tell you how some of this gets easy for the Big Ten.
Cheeseburger.
I tell you how some of this gets easy for the Big Ten to maybe go forward with action is if Penn State beats Michigan this weekend.
That's what I was going to say too. It may all be a moot point after this week.
We got a noon kick. Penn State hosting Michigan in Happy Valley. Penn State, of course, 8-1 on the year. The only loss to Ohio State. Michigan coming in undefeated to this point.
With no test yet.
Correct. I mean, we haven't seen Michigan play really anybody, and they're heading into week 11. This one is a bit interesting to me because I do believe Penn State's defense is good enough to slow down J.J. McCarthy and his passing offense that has been, just out of this world efficient.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious what Penn State can do on offense because we saw that Ohio State game, and it just felt like they were in a box throughout the game.
It was almost like, oh my gosh, we're playing Ohio State. We need to be super ultra conservative and just take what, and it just seemed like they were not the Penn State that they were leading up to that game.
And I should mention Ohio State defensively an elite group, a lot better than I think we thought before the year, but there was a bit of that in that matchup with Penn State, but a lot of it too was just Penn State wasn't trying to stretch the field either horizontally or vertically. Like that's what I'm alluding to here.
It looked
just
like they were
listeners on the same page.
Sort of scared to try to go outside that really tight box, literally, because you said they didn't go deep, they didn't go wide. They were just trying to. Why? You guys haven't done that all year. Why are we doing this now?
It's like they got in a ring with Mike Tyson and we're like, hey, Hell in a Cell. We're ending it here, right here in this little space where I can't run. Like it didn't make a lot of sense. You like that one, huh?
Yes, I did. Caught me in the morning. I got you. Woo. Yeah, but I like that one.
So I'm curious what Penn State can do offensively to try and gain the advantage on Michigan. But I do believe Penn State's defense will be up to the challenge to face this Michigan offense.
I agree. I think this will be a 21-17, 24-21. That real low scoring defensive battle between two offenses that could put up points against any other defense, but they're playing against each other.
Well, and I just looked up the over-under because I think you're about right in that scoring ballpark. Yeah. The over-under is at 44.5.
Yeah. Wow.
So they see it being a fairly low scoring game, especially for high-level college football.
Iowa low, but it's low.
Iowa Rutgers. Thank you for bringing them up. The over-under. Have you seen this?
I have not, but if it's anything close to what we saw for Northwestern Iowa, I can only imagine.
Well, the Northwestern Iowa game, keep in mind, that set a record in college football. We've never seen an over-under dip below 30. It was set at 29.5.
Mashed the under.
They did. Only 17. That was the 7th most points scored at Wrigley Field this year, which is one of my favorite stats that came out of that game. But
except for in baseball, they don't score points.
Well, I tried to find the term that was mutually shared between the sports, and I couldn't figure it out.
Combined score of over 17.
Yeah, I guess that works. Iowa Rutgers. This is at 3:30 from Iowa City. Again, last week was a record over/under, so keep that in mind. That was 29.5. But let's play a higher lower game, Sam. What do you have the over/under being set at?
Let's see. Iowa, you're gonna attribute about 4 points to, so they're probably gonna say Rutgers is gonna score. I'm gonna say 25.
25.
You like that?
Last week was the record at 29.5.
I know.
Well,
I'm attributing 4 points to Iowa. Okay.
Vegas didn't quite
be like 31 or 2.
You got 31 or 32?
Yeah, somewhere in there.
It's 28.5. Another record for the over-under in college football history. Yes, 28.5 is the over-under for Rutgers in Iowa this Saturday.
Okay.
I love that so much.
I think they will hammer the under again. I watched the Iowa Northwestern game. It was atrocious watching the Iowa offense play. And that's not me even trying to make a joke, Dalton. It just looked horrible. It was horrible to watch. It was.
Did you see the account here? I can actually give credit to it. Oh, no, I can't because the account appears to be suspended. But Sicko's committee still has the video up. Somebody took the Iowa Northwestern game with the highlights and put it in silent film mode. So they put it black and white and all grainy, and they had the piano underneath it. Go check that out. Sicko's committee has it. That is some
gotta
great
watch
stuff.
that.
Yeah, it's.
I can only imagine. Did they speed it up too, to where it
Yes.
was like, oh my goodness,
They nailed it. They really nailed it. But yeah, check that out because that was a good laugh for me that night afterwards. But
that
so
game,
those are
that. So like, I don't 28 and a half. Honestly, I was trying to be funny, but 25 seems about right to me.
Yeah, it's you're a field goal away from Vegas agreeing with you. It's crazy. But yeah, so that's two of the games this weekend. We also have how about this? We haven't really touched on what happened last weekend, but as we look forward to this weekend, Michigan State gets a win over Nebraska. Harlan Barnett gets his first win as the leader of the green and white. That was really awesome to see.
Yeah, and I'm not throwing my hand up like, of course, dang it, Michigan State, but about the time that we feel, okay, Nebraska's starting to turn a corner, we're going to see them start to play well. They go to East Lansing and they get beat by Michigan State, who hasn't been playing well, hasn't shown much sign of life, and Nebraska only put 17 points on the board. That's the frustration is the West Division, Dalton. That's this week.
Well, and that's what, I mean, really, if you're examining the Nebraska football experience this season, they're only contending or on a 3-game win streak, really, because, I mean, it's a down year for the Big Ten. And that's not a shot at Nebraska. It's just, they're in the beginning of what is a rebuild. And, I mean, when they beat Purdue, they only threw the ball 11 times. Like, they have, I think, out of their starting 11 on offense, only 3 players are left. I think 8 of them are banged up. So, I mean, this is not Nebraska clicking on all cylinders. It's more of a default of just how rough the conference is this year.
Right. Well, and but like just overall, like we thought we had them pegged. They weren't going to contend at all. They turn around and go on a winning streak and are in a tie for first. And then they go to East Lansing and get beat by Michigan State, who hasn't, like I said, hadn't shown signs of much.
Yeah.
Well, they showed signs that they could perform well at times, and they did.
Again, Michigan State's, I keep saying they've done the heavy lifting in some of these games. They were up 24-6 on Rutgers, and it just didn't finish it. Minnesota, they were right there, or starting to come back, and they kind of shot themselves in the foot. Like, they've been able to do some of the actual productive things. They just haven't finished.
Right.
And that's why Harlan Barnett, has been chirping all week about finish to his team leading up to that game, and it finally clicked with them, and they were able to get the finish. But an awesome moment for Harlan Barnett, who, I mean, has been thrown in an impossible situation.
Yes.
Kept the ship afloat. Everybody loves the guy. He's just about as personable as a guy as you could possibly find. For him to get a win, that was pretty awesome. But Indiana also got a win. So now all the Big Ten teams have a win in conference play as Indiana beat Wisconsin, another Big Ten West team that we thought, hey, they're in the mix for maybe that division championship, and that seems to kind of be out the window now. I shouldn't say out the window, but it's a long road.
Right. Do you know we were a field goal the other way with Northwestern in being a 5-team tie for first in the West?
This is my favorite
Had
part.
Northwestern beaten Iowa, it would have been a 5-way tie at like 3-3.
One of my favorite parts of the Sickos Committee, the Twitter group that I constantly talk about, is around week 9 about Big Ten West football the past couple of years. They'll come out with a graph where they show you how it's possible to get a 7-way tie in the Big Ten West. Who's got to win? Who's got to lose? They go through it all. I think it does. I mean, they're really researching. So the 7-way tie, I believe, is now officially out the window. I think we could still I think we could still have a 5-way tie, but it's gonna a pretty long shot.
Well,
but
it would have been a 5-way. Literally, would have been a 5-way tie had Northwestern beaten Iowa. It would have been 5 teams tied at 3-3 at the top of the West.
I love it so much. It's just so great, but it's Big Ten West football. Real quick, so
but it wasn't a very eventful week, other than like Illinois. I mean, but these are so mild; they're not like huge. I mean, I guess the IU beating Wisconsin surprised me the most of those upsets.
Yeah, I would agree.
That was the biggest one. Maybe the margin of victory for Penn State over Maryland. Maybe.
Yeah, Maryland's really bottoming out, and they now get ready to go to Lincoln, Nebraska to see if they can turn it around, but really bottoming out here late.
Yeah, well, and Talia passed for 286, so he's getting his yards. They're just not scoring points, it appears. I mean, unless they scored 5 field goals to get their 15 points, they only had a couple 3 scoring drives, so I don't. And of course, they might have scored 5 field goals. I don't know. I'm clicking on the box score now. Nope, there was a couple of TDs in there and a 2-point conversion. So, I mean, like, they're just not – they're moving the ball. Talia's got 286 last week.
Yeah.
And they only scored 15 points.
Yeah. But Michigan State goes to Ohio State.
Yes.
Maryland goes to Lincoln. Indiana now goes to Illinois. We already talked about Rutgers, Iowa. We talked about Michigan, Penn State. Minnesota will head to Purdue. Northwestern will head to Wisconsin. That's the football slate for the Big Ten this weekend. I do want to switch real quick, Sam, unless you got something else on football, to the hardwood, because basketball season has tipped.
It just seems so uneventful to this week, other than Michigan, Penn State.
That's kind of the 2023 Big Ten football experience.
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry, I was just enthralled in. I could go watch Purdue play for $4. That's what I was kind of contemplating. So, but it's the other side of Indiana, and I'd have to cross all the state of Indiana to get there. So, I don't know.
The drive isn't worth the game.
No, I'll watch it on TV. It's on NBC, so I'll watch there.
Yeah, fair enough.
And I don't have to worry about getting cold.
Let's head over to Big Ten basketball, where you don't have to get cold because it's indoors, and it's one of the reasons
climate control is wonderful.
Climate
control is wonderful. It is.
So a wacky week to start off the season. We should mention too, we're a little ahead on our recording, so we don't have the games that are happening Thursday night, which will be last night by the time you're hearing this. Michigan State's hosting Southern Indiana, Nebraska hosting Florida A&M. We don't have those results in hand to talk about. But speaking of Michigan State, I mean, I suppose we have to start there. Number 4 Michigan State drops to James Madison on opening night, in what was a shocker, to say the least.
Well, and you're not wrong. That it was a shocker, but I would honestly be a little more shocked if James Madison's not in the tournament.
Yes.
By the end of the season. So, like, Michigan State doesn't just lose to teams. Okay, so they're ones to lose 3-4 games in the preseason. That's fine, but most of the time it's against the highly ranked or really, really strong teams. So if they're losing to a team like James Madison, probably should look for them to be in the tournament, or at least in consideration for the tournament.
Well, and that's what I had a couple of takeaways from this game. One being, watching it, I was like, James Madison is good. Like, they're pretty good. They were a fun team to watch. And by the way, Michigan State's going to be okay. Sure. I know everybody instantly hits panic button because why not? I mean, it's part of the fan experience, right? But they're going to be fine. They have
fan
pieces.
Is short for fanatic,
right? But Michigan State went 1 for 20 from 3-point range in this game. That they even forced it to get to it overtime, shooting 5% from beyond the arc. But I think the bigger thing that stuck out to me was, from some of your upperclassmen, you didn't really get what you expect. And if you're going to reach your ceiling, you're going to maximize your potential this year, I think, and I think Izzo would agree with it, by the way he talked after the game, you've got to have your upperclassmen show up and be more dependable than what that was. I think that's the maybe, if you're going to have a red flag or a siren, that's the issue to take away from it, not just the final score. But I also do believe you can't find anybody better than Tom Izzo to correct maybe mistakes like that from upperclassmen. I think that's going to be worked out. That's why I don't really have any worries long-term with this season or this team. I think Tom Izzo will correct exactly what we're talking about. But the thing that stuck out to me the most was the upperclassmen. It felt like you couldn't fully count on like you should. Now, Tyson Walker came in bald. He had 35 points, played pretty well, played hurt. Maybe made a couple of bad decisions that Izzo was upset with afterwards. But outside of that, the upperclassmen overall, you were just kind of maybe disappointed with. I thought on a bright note, again, Cohen Carr, the freshman, I mean, we knew about his athleticism. Everybody's seen the viral dunk he had from the free throw line at MSU Madness. Like, we knew this guy was just going to break rims all season long. But he hustled his tail off in that game, and you can see he's got the making of something very, very special. Not just a dunker, but somebody who can do a little bit of it all. I think that's a bright takeaway from that opening loss.
Well, and you talked about the fact that you think Izzo's going to get him wrapped around or get him back into shape, and that's what like early season losses. He's used to losing in the early season. Yeah, and again, he's not accepting that, but they play a lot of high-level talented teams to where losses aren't a new thing in the early season for them. So it's really easy to be able to speak about being able to bounce back when you've been through it enough, even if it is a 2-point loss to Gonzaga rather than a 3-point loss in overtime to James Madison. A loss is a loss is a loss. It doesn't matter. You lost. He's been able to get them around to where they're back in. They rebound from losses very well because they understand there's another game coming, so we're making ourselves better. They learn from those losses. So a loss is a loss is a loss. Is it a bad loss? Yes, because Michigan State is number 4 in the country, right? And they shouldn't be losing to teams like James Madison. But again, wholeheartedly expect to see James Madison in March.
Yeah. No, I was watching the game and I just kept thinking, James Madison's playing like it's March. Like, big shots were needed and somebody's there to hit one every time. I was like, whoa. Yeah. They were a pretty fun team to watch. But no, I think we're on the same page. Michigan State long term, I think we both are in agreement that they're going to be fine. These are lessons to be worked on, and if anybody's going to correct maybe effort or energy type of issues, Tom Izzo's the guy to motivate players to get back out there.
Here's a question for you: is Princeton the Ivy League cream of the crop this year, or is Rutgers just really struggling?
So I didn't actually get to watch this game. I saw that score come across. Princeton beat Rutgers 68-61. Yeah. I'm kind of curious about that as well. Now, Princeton was in the NCAA tournament last year and made some headway, if you remember. But for Rutgers, I think we knew heading into the year offensively, this was not the most dynamic group. Rutgers was going to have to Rutgers this season, meaning be gritty on defense, really a physical team, fight for everything, scrappy. But yeah, I was a little surprised to see that result come back across. I needed to sit down and actually get a chance to watch Rutgers here in the near future to see what exactly they're missing offensively. They shot 40% from the floor in this one. They shot 28% from deep. Princeton shot 45% from three-point range. The leading scorer was Cliff Amori for Rutgers, 12.7 boards. Yeah, went 6 of 12 from the floor. And when you consider how many high percentage shots he normally takes, you almost expect that to be a little bit higher than where that's sat. But you are missing some of that point guard play. You used to have Mulcahy there running the show in Rutgers, and he was a great guard. He's now at Washington, by the way, if you're like still trying to update on the transfer portal.
He transferred out.
Yeah. He's at Washington, but I'm not really sure what Rutgers has offensively. You knew they were going to have to grit their way to wins this season, but that one was a bit interesting to me.
And is Florida Gulf Coast better than? Are they the Sweet 16 Florida Gulf Coast, or is IU maybe not as strong as what people expect in going forward?
That was funny too. I put that one on. I had seen bits and pieces of that one. I think IU is going to be okay. And like what we're talking about here, preseason expectations for Indiana, it's not like it was last year. Last year, Indiana was the preseason favorite because we didn't know anything about the other teams. And we knew Trace Jackson Davis was back. You know what I mean? We had something
knew
established.
Shafino was good. We just didn't know exactly how good.
Yeah. And heading into this year, Indiana's what, 6th, 7th in the preseason poll for the Big Ten Conference. That to me seems
high as 5, as low as 7. So
that to me seems about right. I mean, I think ultimately in the Big Ten, I do believe Michigan State's better. I believe Purdue's better. We'll talk about Purdue in a little bit. Yeah. I believe Maryland's better. I believe Illinois is better. I believe Wisconsin's better. And then you can kind of start from there. But I did like what I saw from Khalil Ware, the big man transfer who came from in.
Oregon.
He had 13 points, 12 rebounds for Indiana in this one on just 2 of 5 shooting. Also 4 assists. He led Indiana in every single category. I think they got something pretty special with that. Malik Renault, 15 points. Mbako still just maybe getting his feet wet. It was his first college game at 4 points in this one. But
Galloway had 16.
Galloway went 7 of 9 shooting from the floor. That's kind of one of those veteran voices they're going to depend on. And Xavier Johnson being back, which that's got to be kind of a welcome eye for Hoosier fans. He's a bit of a polarizing experience. There are games where Xavier Johnson, you're like, he might just be the best player on the floor. And in other games where it just shuts off. I mean, it's very up and down with him, but when he's on, he gives Indiana something different offensively. And in that one, he had 14 points. But like, take a look at the bench, Sam. Indiana's bench only scored 7 points in this game.
Right.
As Indiana scored 69. I don't believe there's a ton of depth, maybe is just about the best way to put it. But again, we're preseason talking about Indiana around 6th or 7th in the Big Ten. That still seems obtainable. That seems about appropriate.
Yeah. They, and that's why I asked. You have a better finger on the pulse, but it just it appears to me that they're probably just as good as they're being prognosticated or predicted. I guess they're just kind of middle of the road. They're going to beat some teams they shouldn't. They're going to lose some teams they shouldn't, and they're just going to be kind of right there unless they turn it around and really surprise me. That's kind of what I figure probably will come from IU this year.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think they could get up to 5th in the Big Ten. I don't see them passing, like I said, Michigan State, Purdue for sure. I don't see them passing Maryland. And I don't see them passing Illinois. Maybe they could squeak by Wisconsin in just the way that I see the conference laying out for that 5th spot. But I think that's kind of the ceiling for Indiana this year.
Right. I don't disagree.
But that would put them in the NCAA tournament. So, I mean, that's not a bad year by any means. I'm not trying to poo-poo it, but you get what I'm trying to say. I think that's the max for them.
I'm okay with them being a play-in game. I don't care.
Says the Purdue fan. Well, let's talk about Purdue. Purdue beats Samford in the opener 98-45.
The highlight of the game?
Tip. Yep, had to be. As Samford tweeted out, heart over height as their 5'8" player squared off against Zach Edey for the jump ball. It's great stuff.
And Edey had barely jumped to tip the ball.
I wonder what the official was thinking. As he goes to throw that one, like how do I? It's weird. Normally, there's like another beam,
another
here.
hand,
it's an optical illusion as I go to throw it. But I watched bits and pieces of this game. I was overwhelmed. I thought Purdue was dominating good. Obviously, the score comes out 98-45. But I was impressed. The shooting was through the roof at Mackey. Purdue shot in this game 55% from deep. They went 16 for 29. Braden Smith was shooting well. He went 4 of 5 from deep. Fletcher Lawyer, 4 of 6 from deep. You got great bench production out of the Boilers in this one. Zach Edey did his thing, 16 points, 11 boards, in just 20 minutes of play. Trey Kaufman-Renn, I think he started to see why people are so excited about him a little bit, fitting kind of that 4 role and the presence he can give you. But I got to tell you what stuck out to me the most, Sam, was Lance Jones. And I say that, yeah, the transfer from Southern Illinois.
Yep.
I say that, and he only came away with 6 points, 3 boards, 3 assists. It's not the stat line. But I watched during that game, and we saw last year Zach Edey be Zach Edey. He was a National Player of the Year. We saw Fletcher Lawyer, Braden Smith do that at times, what they did in that game. We've seen the bench step up that way. We've seen Caleb First step up and hit shots. I mean, we've seen a lot of what we saw in that game, Mason Gillis, but we haven't seen a player like Lance Jones at Purdue for a moment where he opens up another dynamic with his athleticism. And last year's team certainly didn't have it. I want to say the last time Purdue had something like that was Jaden Ivey, but the problem was Jaden Ivey was playing out of position at the point guard spot, and it felt like they weren't able to utilize that athleticism quite the correct way or the way they wanted to. And I remember there was a play on defense where Lance Jones was able to pick up a loose ball, and he just exploded into the front court on a fast break, just leaving everybody behind. It adds a dynamic that Purdue has been missing, and I think that's one of those keys for Purdue to actually have a successful postseason instead of the early round exits where St. Peter's and Fairleigh Dickinson, where they've been predictable. You full court trap them. Mm-hmm. Lance Jones is going to be somebody that's hard to full court trap. I think it just adds something else, a different wrinkle, a different layer to this Purdue team.
What I see him potentially being, and this is going to be for the Purdue fans that are my age or even older, is Justin Jennings. Many will not remember who or even know who this guy was, but he was on the teams that fringed Glenn Robinson moving in and then Robinson leaving, and Jennings was still there, but he was the most athletic player on the court. He would at points he would have 9 points in like a minute and a half to 2 minutes of game time, and then there's other times he couldn't hit a free throw, like literally missed the whole entire rim.
Mm-hmm.
But the added bonus of what he could do, his athleticism. I remember Robinson missing a free throw and Jennings storming behind him as it released, and it bounced off. He came up, grabbed it, and slammed it down like the rebound dunk, and he passed Robinson to go do it. So like this athleticism, it was like as soon as the ball was released, he was running in, and nobody knew he was there. That was how athletic he was. That's what he reminds me of. Jones reminds me of.
Yeah, that's fair. And I should say, like with the comparisons, because I use Jaden Ivey as an example. Look, I'm not saying Lance Jones is as good as Jaden Ivey. Hopefully all the listeners are with me there. I'm just saying that the last time this roster had athleticism, it felt like kind of comparable to that.
Right.
But and much to your point, I keep saying it adds a dynamic. And I guess the example I can use is, I mean, look back to that last March Madness where Fairleigh Dickinson upset Purdue. Fairleigh Dickinson was more athletic in the backcourt than Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer. Now, that's not necessarily how you win games, but in a one game wins and survive and advance type mode, I mean, you can suffer a loss there, as Purdue did. Things were stale in that backcourt trying to break a press. You add somebody in here who can move things around a little bit, it just opens new doorways for your team, and that's what Lance Jones, I think, provides to this roster.
Well, and who's going to benefit from having Lance Jones on this team for this year?
Oh, Smith and Lawyer.
Smith and Lawyer. They're going to learn what he does, and then they're also going to be able to have him in the lineup to spell them, to help them make those, like in-game learning right there with Lance Jones. And it's going to make them better, and it's going to make Purdue better because you have that added dynamic.
When you feel that full court pressure and a trap's coming at you, I mean, it felt like last year, I mean, Braden and Fletcher would be in the backcourt, and they're like, oh, God, like where do I even throw it to? And I think the first thought that'll be coming in their heads when they see that pressure now is, where's Lance?
Yeah.
Find Lance. Lance is going to be cutting somewhere. Lance is going to be able to get open. Find Lance. Like, it's just a built-in relief system for this Purdue team. I really was impressed with what I saw.
Well, and I excuse me. It's really weird that you can take out a 43-point win and find those little hidden nuggets of what is beneficial.
53-point win if you don't want to short your own team.
Sorry. 53, not 43, 53-point win that, you win by more than you gave up.
Yep.
But you can find those little nuggets of things that, like you said, Lance Jones scored 6 points.
Yep.
And that is what impressed you the most out of that game. And that's what I'm saying is be able to find those out of a 53-point win. It's great. It's a great game to have.
And again, we're talking about a foundation with Purdue that last year won the Big Ten regular season, was a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. I mean, you bring back the National Player of the Year. We know Zach Edey's good. We know Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer. We know they're all good. But what this adds is something the team was missing, and I think was keeping it from advancing further in the postseason. So I'm pretty impressed.
What good does this? What else good does this do for not just Smith and Lawyer? You have Miles Colvin in the backcourt too with these gentlemen. He's going to learn from Lance. He's got the athleticism.
He does.
Maybe not as athletic as Jones, but he's going to have that athleticism. He plays guard position. Maybe he becomes that position after Jones leaves.
Well, and to a degree, he does some of that same stuff. Like, he's also a part of that athletic dynamic. And we should mention, he got 16 minutes in this game and scored 8 points as well. Like, I mean, it's a more dynamic roster now, and that's what's needed if this team wants to hit expectations.
And Dalton, I texted you. Purdue did add another 7-footer.
I saw that. We have got to get the federal government involved at this point. Somebody stop Matt Painter from finding every giant that exists around the world. Oh my God.
I texted you. You're like, no. That's another 7+ footer going to West Lafayette.
It is just. It's too much. It's just too much height. It's been for 10 years since Simmons came in. Isaac Haas, Matt Harm, Zach Edey. They got another 7-footer on the roster now. Berg just sitting there waiting, and then they just signed another. I'm over it. I'm over the forced experience in West Lafayette. We've got to find a way to get competitive balance in. See, Big Ten, this is where you step in. Shut down Purdue getting all the 7-footers.
Right. Yeah, because that makes all the difference, Dalton.
Anyways, that'll do it for another edition of us here at Big Talk. On the way out, Sam, is there anything you want to add? And of course, you got to let everybody know where they can find us.
I absolutely love football season, but I am so ready for basketball to kick off and start being. Anyways, yeah, I love basketball. I love college basketball. So, anyways, to find us, on the TikToks, the Instagrams, and the platform formerly known as Twitter, you go to at B1G_talk. That's B1G, not BIG, Dalton. B1G_talk. Go to Facebook. It's B1G Talk. Big Talk, not all Big Talk. That's a different show. And every week we are streamed on the ASAP network on Friday mornings. Well, you know that because you're watching it right now. But then later as the audio podcast and the Spotify video cast later that day through Lounge Media Group.
All right.
There you have it.
A big thank you to all of you for tuning in and joining us for another episode of Big Talk, college sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. And for my friend Sam Sprunger, myself, Dalton Shetler, everybody go enjoy some college football and basketball this weekend. Yes. So long, everybody.
See ya.